The Coke was still dripping down her face when Master Sergeant Ryan Crawford laughed and called her sweetheart. 200 soldiers watched. No one moved. No one spoke. The 20-year-old private just sat there soaked and silent, eating her lunch like nothing happened. Crawford thought he had broken another recruit. He thought she was nobody. He had no idea that in 48 hours he would be standing at attention in front of 800 soldiers while that same girl revealed exactly who she was and ended his career with a single sentence. Fort Liberty, North Carolina, August 2024. If you have ever been underestimated because of how you look, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from. And if stories about hidden strength and long-awaited justice matter to you, subscribe now and stay until the end, because what happened next will stay with you. Maya Santos carried her tray through the crowded mess hall at exactly 12:15 on a Tuesday afternoon. She walked with her head slightly down her shoulders, relaxed her uniform showing the single chevron of a private first class. She looked like every other junior enlisted soldier on the base, young, quiet, unremarkable. She had been at Fort Liberty for exactly 3 weeks. In that time, she had learned to be invisible. The mess hall was loud, conversations overlapped, trays clattered. Somewhere near the back, a group of NCOs laughed at something one of them had said. Maya found an empty table near the wall and sat down alone. She always sat alone. It was safer that way. She picked up her fork and started eating. She did not look up when the conversation near her table suddenly stopped. She did not react when the footsteps approached. She had been waiting for this moment for 11 days. Master Sergeant Ryan Crawford stopped directly behind her chair. "Well, well," he said loud enough for the tables around them to hear. "If it isn't our favorite little private." Maya continued eating. She did not turn around. Crawford walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of her. He was 42 years old, 6'3", with 18 years of service and the confidence of a man who had never faced real consequences for anything he had done. His uniform was perfect. His boots were polished. His expression was the kind of smile that made junior soldiers nervous. "I'm talking to you, Santos." Maya looked up. Her face showed nothing. "Yes, Master Sergeant." "That's better." Crawford pulled out the chair across from her and sat down without asking. "You know I've been watching you. 3 weeks on this base, and you still act like you don't belong here." Maya set down her fork. "I'm just trying to do my job, Master Sergeant." "Your job?" Crawford laughed. "Your job is to answer when a senior NCO addresses you. Your job is to show some respect. Your job is to stop acting like you're too good to talk to anyone." 2 soldiers at the next table had stopped eating. They were watching now. Maya kept her voice level. "I apologize if I gave that impression, Master Sergeant. It wasn't intentional." "It wasn't intentional," Crawford repeated, mocking her tone. "You hear that, Martinez?" She didn't mean it. Staff Sergeant Martinez, one of Crawford's regular companions, smirked from a nearby table, but said nothing. Crawford leaned forward. "You know what your problem is, Santos. You think because you're young and pretty you can just float through here without putting in the work. You think the rules don't apply to you." "That's not true, Master Sergeant." "Don't interrupt me." Maya closed her mouth. Crawford's smile widened. "See, I've been in this army for 18 years. I've seen 100 recruits just like you come and go. You think you're special. You think you're different. You're nothing. You're a body filling a slot until you wash out or transfer somewhere else." The mess hall had grown quieter. More soldiers were watching now. 20. 30. The conversations around them had faded to whispers. Maya said nothing. Crawford stood up slowly. "You know what? You look thirsty, Santos. Let me help you out." He walked to the drink station near the wall. He picked up a large cup and filled it with Coke from the fountain. He walked back to Maya's table with the cup held casually in his hand. Maya watched him approach. Her hands were flat on the table. Her breathing was steady. "Master Sergeant." "Shut up." Crawford stood directly beside her chair. He held the cup over her head. "This is what happens to recruits who think they're too good to respect their NCOs." He tilted the cup. The Coke poured down in a slow, deliberate stream. It hit the top of her head first, then ran down her face, her neck, her shoulders. It soaked into her uniform, staining the fabric dark brown. It dripped onto the table, onto her tray, onto the floor. Maya did not move. She sat completely still as the liquid ran down her skin. Her eyes stayed fixed forward. Her hands stayed flat on the table. Her expression showed absolutely nothing. Crawford emptied the entire cup. Then he stepped back and laughed. "There you go, sweetheart. Now you look like you belong here." The mess hall was silent. 200 soldiers sat at their tables watching. Some looked away. Some stared at their food. A few near Crawford's regular table smirked or chuckled nervously. But most of them just sat there, frozen, unwilling to intervene, and unwilling to leave. Maya reached up slowly and wiped the Coke from her eyes. Her hand was steady. Her breathing was even. She picked up her fork. She continued eating. Crawford stared at her for a long moment, clearly expecting a reaction he was not getting. His smile faltered for just a second before he recovered. "What's the matter? Santos?" "Nothing to say." Maya swallowed her food and looked up at him. "May I be excused, Master Sergeant?" Crawford's jaw tightened. "Yeah, get out of my sight." Maya stood up. Coke dripped from her uniform onto the floor. She picked up her tray, walked it to the disposal station, and left the mess hall without looking back. She did not run. She did not cry. She did not say a word to anyone. 200 soldiers watched her go. None of them followed. Crawford turned to his table with a grin. "See, that's how you handle a problem, soldier. You establish dominance. You make it clear who's in charge." Staff Sergeant Martinez nodded, but his smile looked forced. "You don't think that was a little much?" Crawford's expression hardened. "Much. I've been dealing with recruits like her for 18 years. They come in thinking they're special, thinking the rules don't apply to them. If you don't break them down early, they become problems. Trust me, Martinez. She needed that." "What if she reports it?" Crawford laughed. "Reports it to who?" "Her platoon sergeant. He works for me. Her company commander, Captain Williams, plays golf with me every weekend. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Webb, owes me 3 favors. Who's she going to report to Martinez, the president?" Martinez looked down at his food. "I guess you're right." "I'm always right." Crawford sat back down and picked up his burger. "Besides, she's just some nobody PFC who's been here 3 weeks. Nobody even knows her name. By tomorrow, she'll either fall in line or request a transfer. Either way, problem solved." At a table near the window, Specialist Jennifer Cole watched Crawford eat like nothing had happened. Her hands were shaking under the table. She had seen the whole thing. She had done nothing. She thought about the young private walking out of the mess hall with Coke dripping down her face, and she felt sick to her stomach. She thought about saying something to someone reporting what she had witnessed, but then she remembered what had happened to Sergeant Williams last year. Williams had reported Crawford for similar behavior. A month later, Williams was transferred to Alaska with a negative counseling statement in his file. Cole looked at her food and lost her appetite. She did not say anything. She never did. Maya Santos walked back to her barracks without hurrying. She could feel the Coke drying on her skin, sticky and cold in the August heat. She could smell the sugar in her hair. She passed 6 soldiers on the way back, and each one looked away when they saw her. She did not blame them. She understood fear. She understood what it meant to be powerless against someone who controlled your career, your assignments, your entire future in the military. She understood why people stayed silent when speaking up meant becoming the next target. She had seen it before. She had lived it before. But she was not powerless. Not anymore. Maya reached her barracks and closed the door behind her. She walked to her locker, opened it, and pulled out a small black notebook from behind a stack of uniforms. The notebook was full. 3 weeks of observations. Names, dates, times, incidents, witness lists, audio recordings from the small device hidden in her uniform pocket. Today's incident was the 47th she had documented. Master Sergeant Ryan Crawford was not just a bully. He was the center of a pattern that stretched across 3 companies and touched dozens of soldiers. Junior enlisted who had been humiliated. NCOs who had been transferred for speaking up. Complaints that had been buried. Investigations that had been quietly closed. And at the top of it all, protecting Crawford and others like him, was Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb. Webb was the battalion commander. He was also Crawford's protector. Every complaint that had ever been filed about Crawford had crossed Webb's desk, and every single one had disappeared. No investigations. No consequences. No accountability. Maya turned to the last page of her notebook and wrote down the date and time. She described what had happened in precise clinical detail. She noted the names of soldiers she had recognized in the mess hall. 200 witnesses. Not one had intervened. Not one had said, "Stop." She closed the notebook and put it back in its hiding place. Then she walked to her bunk, pulled out a small encrypted phone from beneath her mattress, and typed a message. Final incident documented. Pattern confirmed. Ready for phase 2. She sent the message and waited. 30 seconds later, a response appeared. Understood. General Hayes arrives in 48 hours. Maintain cover until inspection. You have done exceptional work, Sergeant First Class Santos. This ends now. Maya read the message twice. Then she deleted it and powered off the phone. She walked to the small bathroom at the end of the barracks and looked at herself in the mirror. Coke was still drying in her hair. It was streaked down her face and neck, staining her uniform collar. She looked like a broken recruit. She looked like exactly what Crawford wanted to see. But her eyes told a different story. Behind the calm exterior, behind the disciplined silence, there was something else. Something that had survived things far worse than a cup of Coke, poured by a bully who thought he was untouchable. Maya turned on the sink and began washing her face. In 48 hours, Master Sergeant Ryan Crawford would learn what it meant to underestimate the wrong person, and 800 soldiers would stand at attention for a 20-year-old girl he had called sweetheart. That night, Maya lay in her bunk and listened to the sounds of the barracks around her. Soldiers talking quietly. Someone watching a video on their phone with the volume too low. The distant rumble of a helicopter passing overhead. She thought about the mess hall. She thought about the 200 faces that had watched Crawford pour Coke on her head. Some of them had looked disgusted. Some of them had looked scared. Some of them had looked away. But all of them had stayed silent. She did not hate them for it. She understood. In a system where speaking up meant becoming a target, where complaints disappeared and accusers were transferred, silence was survival. It was not cowardice. It was math. The problem was not the soldiers who stayed silent. The problem was the system that made silence the only rational choice. Maya closed her eyes and thought about the soldiers she had met during her 3 weeks on base. Private Torres, who flinched every time an NCO raised their voice. Specialist Kim, who had dark circles under her eyes and never smiled. Sergeant First Class Williams, who had been one of the good ones until Crawford got him transferred. She thought about the complaint forms she had seen in the administrative office. Stacks of them filed and forgotten. Incident reports that went nowhere. Witness statements that were never followed up. She thought about Lieutenant Colonel Webb, who signed off on every buried complaint with the same neat signature, the same dismissive note. Insufficient evidence, no further action required, 47 incidents in 3 weeks, dozens of soldiers whose complaints had been ignored, years of abuse protected by rank and connections, and in 48 hours it would all be over. Maya opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling. She thought about her father who had taught her to shoot when she was 12. He had been a quiet man, a truck driver who worked double shifts to pay the bills, who came home exhausted every night but still found time to take her to the range on weekends. He had died when she was 16. Heart attack. No warning. She had enlisted the day she turned 17 with her mother's signature on the consent form. "Go make something of yourself, Miha," her mother had said. "Your father would be proud." Maya did not know if her father would be proud of what she had become. She did not know if he would recognize the girl who had lied about her age to join special operations, the girl who had killed 14 men in a firefight that lasted 6 hours, the girl who had been awarded the Medal of Honor in a ceremony so classified that her own mother did not know about it. She did not know if he would be proud, but she knew he would understand. You do what needs to be done, Miha, even when it costs you, especially when it costs you. Maya closed her eyes again. 48 hours. The next morning, Maya reported for duty at the supply warehouse at 0630. She wore a fresh uniform. Her hair was clean. There was no trace of the coke that had soaked her the day before. Specialist Cole was already there sorting inventory. Cole looked up when Maya walked in. Her face was a mixture of guilt and something else that Maya could not quite identify. Santos. Cole. Maya started her assigned tasks without another word. She checked manifests. She counted supplies. She logged discrepancies in the inventory system. Cole watched her for several minutes before speaking again. "About yesterday." "Don't." Cole stopped. Maya looked at her directly for the first time. "I said don't. I just wanted to say, I know what you wanted to say." Maya's voice was calm but firm. "You wanted to say you're sorry. You wanted to say you should have done something. You wanted to tell me that Crawford is a bully and nobody can stop him and the system is broken." When Cole's face flushed. "That's not—" "It is. And it's fine. I don't need your apology, Cole. I don't need you to feel guilty. What I need is for you to answer one question." Cole swallowed. "What question?" Maya stepped closer. "When the time comes, and it will come, are you going to keep being silent? Or are you going to finally stand up?" Cole stared at her. "What do you mean when the time comes?" Maya held her gaze for a long moment. Then she turned back to her work. "You'll know. Just remember what you saw yesterday. Remember how it felt to do nothing. And when the time comes, make a different choice." Cole opened her mouth to respond, but Maya was already walking away, clipboard in hand, every step measured and deliberate. Cole stood alone in the warehouse, her heart pounding, her mind racing. Something about the way Santos had spoken, the certainty in her voice, the calmness in her eyes felt wrong. It felt too controlled, too confident. Private First Class Santos was supposed to be a nobody, A new recruit, another body filling a slot. But the woman who had just spoken to Cole did not sound like a recruit at all. She sounded like someone who was waiting. Master Sergeant Crawford walked into the company headquarters at 0900, whistling a tune he had heard on the radio that morning. He was in a good mood. The Santos situation was handled. The other soldiers had seen what happened and would fall in line. Life was good. He stopped at the admin desk and picked up his morning coffee. "Anything I need to know about?" The admin specialist, a nervous corporal named Davis, looked up from his computer. "Actually, Master Sergeant, there's a notice from battalion. Some kind of inspection coming up." Crawford frowned. "Inspection? What kind of inspection?" "Doesn't say specifically, just that a general officer will be on base in 2 days for a command review." Crawford set down his coffee. "A general? Which one?" "Lieutenant General Patricia Hayes, Deputy Chief of Staff." Crawford's frown deepened. "Hayes? The 3-star. What the hell is she doing at Fort Liberty?" "No idea, Master Sergeant. The notice just says all units should prepare for possible review." Crawford stood there for a moment, thinking. A 3-star general showing up unannounced for a command review was unusual. It usually meant something was wrong, an accident, a scandal, a complaint that had reached the wrong desk. But Crawford had been careful. He always covered his tracks. Webb protected him. The system protected him. This was probably nothing. Just some political show. Some box-checking exercise from Washington. He picked up his coffee and headed to his office. "Let me know if you hear anything else, Davis." "Yes, Master Sergeant." Crawford closed his office door and sat down at his desk. For the first time in a long time, he felt a small flicker of unease in his stomach. He pushed it aside and opened his email. It was probably nothing. 47 hours remained. Maya Santos spent the day doing exactly what she had done for the past 3 weeks. She sorted supplies. She filed paperwork. She answered questions with short, polite responses. She ate lunch alone in a corner of the mess hall, far from Crawford's usual table. Crawford saw her once across the motor pool. He smirked and kept walking. She did not react. That night she took out her notebook and reviewed everything one final time. Every incident. Every name. Every buried complaint. Tomorrow, General Hayes would arrive. Tomorrow, the soldiers of Fort Liberty would learn that the quiet little recruit who never fought back had been watching them all along. And Master Sergeant Ryan Crawford would learn that some people are exactly what they appear to be, while others are something else entirely. Maya closed the notebook. She was ready. The morning of the second day began like every other morning Maya had endured at Fort Liberty. She woke at 0500, made her bunk with precise corners, and walked to the latrine without speaking to anyone. But today was different. Today, 24 hours separated her from the end of everything she had built. She stood at the sink and looked at her reflection. 20 years old, 5'4", 118 pounds. The face that stared back at her looked exactly like what Crawford saw, young, soft, forgettable. Nobody would ever guess what that face had seen. Nobody would ever guess what those hands had done. Maya splashed water on her face and pushed the memories down. Not yet. She could not afford to think about Syria yet. She could not afford to remember the smell of blood and dust, the sound of bullets cracking overhead, the weight of Sergeant Morrison's body as she dragged him behind cover. Not yet. She had a job to finish first. 24 hours. Maya dried her face and walked back to her bunk. Her encrypted phone was exactly where she had left it, hidden beneath the thin mattress. She powered it on and found one message waiting. General Hayes departed Washington at 400. Arrival, Fort Liberty, 1300 hours. Maintain position. Final briefing upon her arrival. Stay safe, Maya. The message was signed with a single initial H. Maya deleted it immediately. 1300 hours. 7 hours from now. She could survive 7 more hours of being nobody. Specialist Cole was waiting outside the barracks when Maya emerged. Her face was pale, and she kept glancing over her shoulder like she expected someone to appear. "Santos, I need to talk to you." Maya kept walking toward the supply warehouse. "Not here." Cole fell into step beside her. "Something's wrong. I heard Crawford talking to Sergeant Martinez this morning. He was asking questions about you." Maya did not slow down. "What kind of questions? Where you came from? Who your recruiter was? Why your file is so thin?" Cole's voice dropped to a whisper. "He said something doesn't add up about you." Maya felt a cold knot form in her stomach, but her face showed nothing. "Did he say anything else?" "He said he's going to make some calls, check with some people he knows at personnel." They reached the warehouse door. Maya stopped and turned to face Cole directly. "Jennifer, listen to me carefully. Whatever Crawford finds or doesn't find it doesn't matter. In less than 24 hours, everything changes. I need you to trust me." Cole's eyes widened. "What are you talking about, Santos? What's going on? I can't tell you. Not yet." Maya held her gaze. "But I need to know something. Yesterday in the mess hall, you watched Crawford pour that coke on my head. You watched 200 people do nothing. How did that make you feel?" Cole looked away. "Sick. It made me feel sick. Good. Remember that feeling. Because when the time comes, you're going to have a choice. You can stay silent like everyone else, or you can finally be the person you want to be." "I don't understand." "You will." Maya pushed open the warehouse door and walked inside, leaving Cole standing in the morning heat with 100 questions and no answers. The morning passed slowly. Maya sorted equipment, filed requisitions, and avoided eye contact with everyone she encountered. But her mind was somewhere else entirely, replaying the events that had brought her here, the mission that had begun 8 months ago in a Pentagon conference room. Lieutenant General Patricia Hayes had been the one to approach her. Maya remembered the moment perfectly. She had been sitting in a waiting room outside the Army Chief of Staff's office, still recovering from the wounds she had sustained in Syria, when a 3-star general walked in and sat down beside her. "Sergeant First Class Maya Santos, the Medal of Honor recipient no one knows about." Maya had stiffened. "Ma'am." Hayes had studied her for a long moment. "Relax, Sergeant. I'm not here to blow your cover. I'm here because I need someone with your particular skills for a very particular mission." "What kind of mission?" Hayes had leaned closer. "The kind that requires someone who can disappear. Someone who can become invisible. Someone who can walk into a broken system and document exactly how broken it is without anyone suspecting a thing." Maya had listened as Hayes explained. Reports of systematic abuse at Fort Liberty, hazing incidents that had been buried, complaints that disappeared, soldiers who had attempted suicide after their cries for help went unanswered. A network of NCOs and officers who protected each other while destroying the careers of anyone who spoke up. "I need proof," Hayes had said. "Concrete, documented, undeniable proof. Enough to tear down the entire structure and rebuild it from scratch. And I need someone who can get that proof without getting destroyed in the process." "Why me?" Hayes had smiled. "Because you survived 6 hours alone against 43 enemy combatants. Because you dragged 8 wounded teammates to safety while bleeding from 3 gunshot wounds. Because you are the most decorated soldier in this army whose name no one knows." The general had paused. And because you look exactly like the kind of soldier they target, young, female, alone, they will never see you coming. Maya had agreed that same day. She had spent 3 months training for the mission, learning to suppress every instinct that years of combat had drilled into her, learning to be small again, learning to be weak, learning to take abuse without fighting back. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, harder than Syria, harder than the firefight, harder than the 6 hours of hell that had earned her a medal she could never wear in public. But she had done it. She had become Private First Class Maya Santos' new recruit, nobody special. And for 3 weeks, she had watched Fort Liberty's poison spread while documenting every drop. The warehouse door banged open. Maya looked up from her clipboard. Master Sergeant Crawford stood in the doorway, his face twisted with something between suspicion and anger. "Santos, my office, now." The walk to Crawford's office took 4 minutes. Maya counted every step. She kept her eyes forward, her expression blank, her breathing steady. Soldiers in the hallway stepped aside as Crawford passed. A few glanced at Maya with expressions that ranged from pity to curiosity. Crawford's office was small and cluttered. He closed the door behind them and pointed to a chair. "Sit." Maya sat. Crawford remained standing, looming over her. "I made some calls this morning, Santos. Talked to some friends at personnel. Asked them to pull your file." Maya said nothing. "Funny thing about your file. It's almost empty. Basic training records, assignment orders, a few PT scores. That's it. No hometown information, no family contacts, no emergency notification forms." "I don't have family, Master Sergeant. They're all deceased." Crawford's eyes narrowed. "That's convenient. What about your recruiter Sergeant First Class Williams out of El Paso?" "That's correct." "Also convenient. Williams retired 6 months ago, moved to Mexico, no forwarding address." Maya kept her face neutral. "I wasn't aware of that, Master Sergeant." Crawford leaned down until his face was inches from hers. "Who are you, Santos?" "I'm Private First Class Maya Santos, Master Sergeant, supply specialist, assigned to—" "Don't give me that bullshit!" Crawford's voice was low and dangerous. "I've been in this army for 18 years. I know when something doesn't add up, and you Santos don't add up." Maya met his eyes without flinching. "I don't know what you want me to say, Master Sergeant." And Crawford stared at her for a long moment. Then he straightened up and walked behind his desk. "Here's what I think. I think you're hiding something. I think someone sent you here. I think you're not who you say you are." Maya's heart was pounding, but her voice remained steady. "With respect, Master Sergeant, that's not true." "We'll see." Crawford picked up his phone. "I've got a friend at CID, Criminal Investigation Division. I'm going to ask him to run a full background check on you. The kind that digs deep, the kind that finds things." He started dialing. Maya watched him punch in the numbers. She watched him raise the phone to his ear. She watched him wait for someone to answer. And then she said 4 words that changed everything. "Put down the phone." Crawford froze. "What did you just say to me?" "I said, put down the phone, Master Sergeant." Something in Maya's voice had changed. The softness was gone. The deference was gone. What remained was cold and hard and absolutely certain. Crawford lowered the phone slowly. "You want to explain yourself, Private?" Maya stood up. She did not ask permission. She did not wait for his approval. She simply rose from the chair and met his eyes with an expression he had never seen on a junior soldier's face. "I'll explain everything tomorrow, at 1300 hours, in front of the entire battalion." Crawford's face went red. "You think this is a joke? You think you can talk to me like—" "I think you have approximately 20 hours left in your career, Master Sergeant. I think everything you've done to soldiers on this base is about to come to light. I think every complaint you buried, every career you destroyed, every soldier you humiliated is about to matter." Maya stepped closer. "And I think you should be very, very careful about what you do next." Crawford's mouth opened and closed. For the first time since Maya had arrived at Fort Liberty, she saw fear in his eyes. "Who the hell are you? You'll find out tomorrow. Everyone will." Maya walked to the door. "Santos, you stop right there. That's an order." She paused with her hand on the doorknob. "Master Sergeant, you can court-martial me. You can write me up. You can throw me in the stockade. But in 20 hours it won't matter. Nothing you do to me between now and then will change what's coming." She opened the door. "Enjoy your last night as a Master Sergeant Crawford. You've earned everything that's about to happen to you." She walked out and closed the door behind her. Crawford stood alone in his office, his phone still in his hand, his face pale. He had been threatened before. By soldiers, by officers, by civilians who didn't understand how the military worked. He had survived all of them. He had outlasted every challenge. But something about the way Santos had looked at him, the absolute certainty in her eyes, made his hands shake. He picked up the phone and dialed a different number. "Webb, we have a problem." Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb was in his office when Crawford's call came through. He listened without interrupting as Crawford explained what had happened. "She said what?" "She said, I have 20 hours left in my career. She said everything's about to come to light. She said she's going to explain everything tomorrow at 1300. Webb was silent for a long moment. "That's when the general arrives." "I know. This isn't a coincidence. I know that too." Webb rubbed his forehead. "I'll handle it. I'll talk to the MPs. We'll find a reason to detain her before the inspection. Disorderly conduct, insubordination, something. And if that doesn't work, it'll work. She's a PFC with no connections. We have the entire command structure. Whatever she thinks she knows, it won't matter if she's sitting in a holding cell when the general shows up." Crawford exhaled. Okay, good. That's good. Ryan, listen to me. Whatever happens, keep your mouth shut. Don't talk to anyone else about this. Don't make any more calls. Just act normal and let me handle it." "Got it." Webb hung up and sat back in his chair. He thought about the complaints he had buried over the years, the investigations he had shut down, the soldiers whose careers he had destroyed because they threatened his friends, his network, his carefully constructed system. He thought about Private First Class Maya Santos, who had walked into Crawford's office and spoken like someone who had nothing to fear. And for the first time in 15 years, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb felt something he barely recognized: doubt. Maya spent the rest of the day in the supply warehouse, working in silence, waiting. She knew Crawford would make calls. She knew Webb would try to intervene. She had planned for this. At 1700 hours, she walked to the base chapel. Chaplain Thomas Reed was waiting for her inside. He was 52 years old, with kind eyes and a gentle voice that had comforted hundreds of soldiers over his 20-year career. He was also General Hayes's eyes and ears on the ground, the one person at Fort Liberty who knew exactly who Maya was. "They're moving against you." Maya nodded. "I expected they would. What do you know?" "Webb called the MP station an hour ago. They're preparing paperwork to detain you for insubordination. The arrest is scheduled for 2100 hours. That gives me 4 hours. General Hayes knows. She's moving up her timeline. Instead of arriving at 1300 tomorrow, she'll be here at 0600. The inspection will begin immediately upon her arrival." Maya felt something loosen in her chest. "Webb won't know until it's too late." "That's the plan." But Chaplain Reed put a hand on her shoulder. "Maya, I've watched you for 3 weeks. I've seen what you've endured. I want you to know that what you've done here, what you've sacrificed, it matters. These soldiers needed someone to fight for them, and you did. Maya looked at him. I didn't fight. I just watched and documented. Sometimes that's the hardest fight of all. She thought about the mess hall, the coke dripping down her face, the 200 silent witnesses. She thought about every soldier who had suffered at Crawford's hands while the system looked away. Tomorrow they'll know the truth. Yes, they will. Maya walked to the door, then stopped. Chaplain, when this is over, when everyone knows who I really am, some of these soldiers are going to feel ashamed. They're going to remember how they watched and did nothing. They're going to need someone to help them process that. Reed nodded slowly. I'll be here. Good. Maya opened the door. Because I don't want them to feel guilty. I want them to learn. I want them to become the people who stand up next time. She walked out into the evening air. 12 hours remained until General Hayes arrived. 12 hours until the woman they called Sweetheart revealed who she really was. 12 hours until 800 soldiers learned that courage sometimes looks like silence, and that justice sometimes arrives in the uniform of a 20-year-old girl they had all underestimated. Maya walked back to her barracks. Her steps measured her breathing steady. Crawford and Webb thought they were hunting her. They had no idea they were already caught. The MPs came for Maya at 2100 hours exactly. She was sitting on her bunk, still in uniform, when the barracks door opened and 2 military police officers walked in. Staff Sergeant Peters and Corporal Williams. Their faces were professionally blank, but Maya could see the discomfort in their eyes. Private First Class Santos. Maya stood up slowly. Yes. You need to come with us. Lieutenant Colonel Webb has ordered you detained for insubordination pending investigation. The other soldiers in the barracks had gone silent. They watched from their bunks, pretending not to look while seeing everything. Maya nodded calmly. I understand. May I ask where I'm being taken? MP station. You'll be held there until further notice. Of course. She walked toward them without resistance. Staff Sergeant Peters looked almost disappointed that she was not fighting back. He had probably expected tears or protests, or at least some kind of reaction. Maya gave him nothing. They walked her out of the barracks and into the night. The air was warm and heavy with humidity. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter was landing. Maya counted her steps. She counted her breaths. She kept her mind focused on what was coming. 9 hours until General Hayes arrived. 9 hours until everything changed. The MP station was small and quiet at this hour. They processed her paperwork in silence, took her personal effects, and escorted her to a holding cell. The cell had a cot, a toilet, and nothing else. Someone will check on you in the morning, Staff Sergeant Peters said. If you need anything, there's a call button by the door. Maya sat down on the cot. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. Peters hesitated at the door. Santos, I don't know what you did to piss off Webb and Crawford, but whatever it was, it must have been something. I've never seen them move this fast on an insubordination charge. They're scared. Peters blinked. What? They're scared of me. They just don't know why yet. Peters stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head and closed the cell door. Maya lay back on the cot and closed her eyes. 9 hours. She could wait 9 hours. What she did not know was that 400 miles away, Lieutenant General Patricia Hayes was already in the air, pushing her pilots to shave every possible minute off their flight time. And what Crawford and Webb did not know was that the phone call Webb had made to the MP station had been intercepted, recorded, and added to a file that was growing thicker by the hour. The trap was closing. They just could not see the walls yet. At 0400, Maya was awakened by the sound of footsteps in the corridor outside her cell. She sat up immediately, her instincts sharp despite the uncomfortable cot and the sleepless hours. The footsteps were heavy, deliberate, angry. The cell door swung open. Master Sergeant Crawford stood in the doorway, his face twisted with fury. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Maya remained seated on the cot. "Master Sergeant, I wasn't expecting visitors." Crawford stepped into the cell. Behind him, Maya could see Staff Sergeant Peters watching nervously from the corridor. "Crawford, you can't be in there." "Shut up, Peters. I outrank you. Go take a walk." Peters hesitated, then disappeared down the corridor. Crawford closed the cell door behind him. They were alone. "I've been making calls all night, Santos, pulling every string I've got. And you know what? I found nothing. Your file is a ghost. Your recruiter doesn't exist. Your hometown can't be verified." Maya watched him without expression. "That must be frustrating." "Who are you? I told you, you'll find out in a few hours." Crawford stepped closer. His hands were clenched at his sides. His breathing was fast and shallow. "I could make you disappear, you know. Right now. Right here. Peters is gone. The cameras in this station have been having technical difficulties for months. It would be so easy." Maya stood up slowly. She was 5'4". Crawford was 6'3". He outweighed her by at least 80 pounds. But when she met his eyes, something in his face changed. Something flickered behind the anger. It looked like fear. "You won't touch me," Maya said quietly. "Yeah, why not?" "Because you're not a killer, Crawford. You're a bully. You like to hurt people who can't fight back. You like to humiliate soldiers who are smaller than you, weaker than you, lower ranking than you. But you've never actually destroyed someone completely. You've never crossed that line." She stepped closer to him. "And some part of you, the part that still remembers why you put on that uniform in the first place, knows that if you cross that line tonight, there's no coming back." Crawford's jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about me." "I know everything about you. You know about Sergeant Williams, who you got transferred to Alaska because he reported you. I know about Private Chen, who attempted suicide after you humiliated her in front of her platoon. I know about the 17 formal complaints that Lieutenant Colonel Webb buried on your behalf." Crawford's face went pale. "How do you—" "I know about the deal you made with Webb. He protects you, you protect him. A network of silence that's been rotting this command from the inside for years." Maya was inches from him now, close enough to smell the coffee on his breath, close enough to see the sweat forming on his forehead. "I know everything, Crawford, and in 2 hours everyone else will too." Crawford stood frozen. For a moment, Maya thought he might actually hit her. His fists were shaking. His face was red. Then he stepped back. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" He pointed a trembling finger at her. "Whatever you think you know, it won't matter. Webb has connections all the way to Washington. One phone call and this whole thing goes away." Maya smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in 3 weeks. "You think this investigation was my idea? You think I walked into Fort Liberty on my own because I wanted to play hero?" Crawford's face changed. "What? This investigation was ordered by the Deputy Chief of Staff of the United States Army, Lieutenant General Patricia Hayes. She's been building this case for 8 months. She personally selected me for this mission because I have skills you can't even imagine." Maya stepped back and sat down on her cot. "Webb's connections won't save him. Your friends won't save you. In 2 hours, this base is going to meet the real Maya Santos. And when they do, you're going to wish you had never picked up that cup of Coke." Crawford stared at her. His mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Then he turned, yanked open the cell door, and stormed out of the MP station. Maya watched him go. She knew he would run straight to Webb. She knew they would try something desperate. But it did not matter anymore. General Hayes would be on the ground in less than 2 hours, and nothing Crawford or Webb could do would change what was coming. At 0530, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb was pacing his office, his uniform disheveled, his face gray with exhaustion. Crawford sat in a chair across from him, his leg bouncing nervously. "She knows everything, Webb. Everything. She mentioned Chen. She mentioned Williams. She mentioned the buried complaints. She knows about our arrangement." Webb stopped pacing. "That's impossible. Those records are sealed. Half of them don't even exist anymore." "Well, she's got them somehow. She said this investigation came from Washington, from the Deputy Chief of Staff." Webb's face went white. "Hayes, Patricia Hayes." "That's what she said." "That's not possible. Hayes wouldn't—" Webb stopped himself. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number. "General Thornton's office, this is— I need to speak with the General immediately. This is Lieutenant Colonel Webb at Fort Liberty. It's an emergency." "I'm sorry, sir. General Thornton is not available. He's in transit." "In transit where? I'm not at liberty to say, sir." Webb hung up and dialed another number. Then another. Each call went unanswered or was deflected by staffers who gave nothing away. He slammed the phone down. "They're cutting us off. Everyone I know in Washington is suddenly unavailable." Crawford stood up. "What do we do? I don't know." "You don't know, Webb, my career is over if this comes out. Everything I've built, everything I've done— Shut up, I need to think." Webb paced the room again. His mind raced through options. They could destroy evidence. They could intimidate witnesses. They could get Santos transferred somewhere far away before any investigation could proceed. But Hayes was coming. If what Santos said was true, Hayes was already in the air. There was no time. "We deny everything," Webb said finally. "We say Santos is mentally unstable. We say she made threats against you, and that's why we detained her. We discredit her before she can discredit us. And if she has proof, what proof could she possibly have? She's been here 3 weeks. She's a PFC." Crawford shook his head. "You didn't see her face, Webb. When she talked to me in that cell, she wasn't scared. She wasn't nervous. She looked at me like I was already finished." Webb's jaw tightened. "She's playing a psychological game, trying to rattle us. That's all this is." "I don't think so. It doesn't matter what you think. Get yourself together. Get cleaned up. When Hayes arrives, we act normal. We cooperate. We answer questions calmly. And if Santos tries anything, we make her look like a troubled soldier with a grudge." Crawford took a deep breath. Okay, yeah. That could work. It will work. It has to." Neither of them noticed the small microphone hidden behind the filing cabinet. Neither of them knew that every word they had just spoken was being transmitted to a receiver in Chaplain Reed's office. Neither of them knew that their conversation had just become evidence. At exactly 0600, a Black Hawk helicopter touched down on the main landing pad at Fort Liberty. Lieutenant General Patricia Hayes stepped out before the rotors had fully stopped. She was 57 years old, with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen 30 years of service. She wore her combat uniform with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every star on her collar. Behind her came a team of 8 investigators from the Army Inspector General's office. Behind them came 4 military police officers from Fort Bragg soldiers who had never served at Fort Liberty and had no connections to anyone on base. The base commander, Colonel Frederick Morrison, met her at the landing zone. "General Hayes, we weren't expecting you until 1300 hours. Hayes did not slow down. "Plans changed. Walk with me, Colonel." Morrison scrambled to keep up. "Yes, ma'am. If you'll tell me what this is about, You'll find out with everyone else. Where is the soldier being held in the MP station, Private First Class Maya Santos?" Morrison looked confused. "I wasn't aware we had anyone in custody, ma'am. Let me check." Don't bother. Hayes pulled out her phone and made a call. This is General Hayes. Execute the release order. Bring her to the parade ground. She has 30 minutes to prepare. She hung up and turned to Colonel Morrison. I want the entire battalion assembled on the parade ground in 1 hour. Full formation. No exceptions. Ma'am, I don't understand. You will. Hayes walked away, leaving Morrison standing on the tarmac with a growing sense of dread. Something very bad was about to happen, and he had a terrible feeling he was somehow part of it. The MP station door opened at 06:15. Maya was standing when Chaplain Reed walked in, followed by 2 of Hayes's investigators. It's time, Reed said quietly. Maya nodded. One of the investigators handed her a small bag. Your uniform, Sergeant First Class. General Hayes thought you might want to look the part. Maya opened the bag and pulled out a freshly pressed Army combat uniform. On the collar, the insignia of a Sergeant First Class E7. On the chest above the name tape, a small blue ribbon with white stars. The Medal of Honor. Maya changed quickly while the investigators waited outside. When she emerged, she was no longer Private First Class Santos, the invisible recruit who had endured 3 weeks of abuse without complaint. She was Sergeant First Class Maya Santos, the youngest living recipient of the nation's highest military honor. And she was ready. Reed walked beside her toward the parade ground. Crawford and Webb have been summoned to the formation. They don't know why. Neither does anyone else on base. Good. Maya, I want you to know something. When General Hayes asked me to be your contact on this mission, I wasn't sure you could do it. I've seen soldiers go undercover before, and most of them break. The abuse gets to them. The silence gets to them. The loneliness gets to them. He stopped walking and turned to face her. You never broke. Not once. In 3 weeks of watching Crawford and Webb destroy everything this uniform is supposed to represent, you never lost your composure. You never lost your mission. You never lost yourself. Maya looked at him. I lost myself once, Chaplain. In Syria. When I thought I was going to die alone in that building surrounded by enemies, I lost everything. My hope. My faith. My will to keep fighting. What brought you back? Maya was quiet for a moment. I heard one of my teammates calling for help, Sergeant Morrison. He was hit bad, and he was calling my name. And I realized something. I wasn't fighting to survive. I was fighting for him. For all of them. When you're fighting for someone else, you can endure things you never thought possible. She started walking again. These soldiers at Fort Liberty, they're not my teammates. I don't know most of their names, but they're still my people. And Crawford and Webb were hurting them while the system looked the other way. So you became the one who looked. Yes. They reached the edge of the parade ground. 800 soldiers were assembling in formation, companies and platoons moving into position, NCOs barking orders, the controlled chaos of a military unit preparing for inspection. Maya watched them from the shadows. Somewhere in that formation, Crawford was standing with his soldiers trying to look calm, while his career crumbled around him. Somewhere in that formation, Webb was rehearsing his denials, convinced he could talk his way out of anything. Somewhere in that formation, Specialist Cole was wondering what Maya had meant when she said the time was coming. In 30 minutes, they would all know. In 30 minutes, the woman they had called sweetheart would stand before them as something else entirely. In 30 minutes, 800 soldiers would learn what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. Maya stepped out of the shadows and walked toward the parade ground. The sun was rising over Fort Liberty, and judgment was coming with it. General Hayes stood at the front of the formation, watching the battalion assemble. Colonel Morrison stood beside her, his face pale with confusion and growing fear. General, with all due respect, I need to understand what's happening. This is my command. Not anymore. Morrison froze. What? Hayes turned to face him. Colonel Morrison, you are being relieved of command effective immediately pending investigation into your failure to address systemic misconduct under your authority. You will surrender your sidearm and report to the investigation team for questioning. Morrison's mouth opened and closed. General, I had no knowledge. We'll determine what you knew. But your soldiers have been suffering for years while you signed reports and looked the other way. Whether that makes you complicit or merely incompetent, either way, you're done here. 2 MPs stepped forward and escorted Morrison away. The formation had gone completely silent. 800 soldiers stood at attention watching their base commander being led away in disgrace. And they had no idea it was just the beginning. Hayes keyed her microphone. At ease. The formation relaxed slightly, but the tension remained. Soldiers of the 525th Military Intelligence Brigade. I am Lieutenant General Patricia Hayes, Deputy Chief of Staff of the United States Army. I am here because this command has failed you. She paused, letting the words settle. For the past 8 months, my office has been investigating reports of systematic hazing abuse of authority and command failure at this installation. Today, that investigation concludes. Murmurs rippled through the formation. Hayes raised her hand. 3 weeks ago, I sent an investigator to this base. Someone who could blend in. Someone who could document the truth from the inside. Someone who could become exactly the kind of soldier that certain leaders on this base like to target. She turned toward the edge of the formation. Private First Class Maya Santos front and center. 800 heads turned. From the back of the formation, a figure in a sergeant's uniform stepped forward. She walked down the center aisle between the assembled companies, her steps measured and deliberate. Her uniform was perfect. Her posture was flawless. And on her chest above her heart was a small blue ribbon that made no sense on a 20-year-old woman. The Medal of Honor. The formation began to stir. Whispers spread like wildfire. Crawford, standing in the 3rd row, felt his legs nearly buckle. Webb, positioned near the front, stopped breathing. Maya reached the front of the formation and turned to face the soldiers. General Hayes spoke again. What you are looking at is Sergeant First Class Maya Santos. At age 19, she was awarded the Medal of Honor for extraordinary valor in combat. She single-handedly held a defensive position for 6 hours, eliminated 14 enemy combatants, and saved the lives of 8 wounded teammates while sustaining 3 gunshot wounds herself. The formation was absolutely still. Her identity has been classified due to ongoing threats from terrorist organizations. She was selected for this mission because she possesses something rare, the ability to appear powerless while being anything but. Hayes turned to Maya. Sergeant First Class Santos, do you have anything to say to these soldiers? Maya looked out at the formation. 800 faces staring back at her. Some confused, some shocked, some beginning to understand. She found Crawford in the 3rd row. He looked like he was going to be sick. She found Cole near the middle of the formation. Cole's eyes were wide with realization. Maya stepped to the microphone. 3 weeks ago, I arrived at this base wearing the uniform of a private first class. I was told to be invisible, to be weak, to become the kind of soldier that predators target. Her voice was steady and clear. I watched Master Sergeant Ryan Crawford pour a cup of Coke over my head in front of 200 witnesses. I watched those 200 soldiers do nothing. I understood why they stayed silent. The system was broken. Speaking up meant becoming the next target. She paused. I documented 47 incidents of misconduct during my 3 weeks on this base. I collected witness statements, audio recordings, and evidence of buried complaints dating back years, and I discovered something worse than I expected. Maya turned slightly, looking toward where Webb stood. The problem wasn't just a few bad leaders. It was a network of protection that reached all the way to the battalion commander, a system designed to shield abusers while destroying anyone who tried to expose them. She turned back to the formation. Today, that system ends. General Hayes stepped forward. Master Sergeant Ryan Crawford and Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb, step forward. The formation held its breath. Crawford did not move. Webb did not move. Hayes's voice hardened. That was not a request. Military police, bring them forward. 4 MPs moved into the formation and escorted Crawford and Webb to the front. They stood before 800 of their peers, their faces gray, their careers already over. Hayes addressed them directly. Master Sergeant Crawford, you are being charged with hazing conduct unbecoming and creating a hostile environment. Lieutenant Colonel Webb, you are being charged with dereliction of duty, obstruction of investigation, and conduct unbecoming an officer. Both of you will be detained pending court-martial proceedings. Crawford's voice cracked. This is insane. She's lying. We have audio recordings of your conversation in the holding cell early this morning. Hayes interrupted. We have audio recordings of your conversation with Lieutenant Colonel Webb in which you discussed destroying evidence and discrediting the investigator. We have 3 years of buried complaint forms with Webb's signature on them. Crawford shut his mouth. Webb stared straight ahead, saying nothing. Hayes turned to the formation. This battalion is about to render proper honors to Sergeant First Class Maya Santos. And then we are going to begin the process of rebuilding this command from the ground up. She turned to Maya. Sergeant First Class Santos, take your position. Maya stepped forward and stood at attention before the formation. Hayes commanded the battalion. Battalion, attention. 800 soldiers snapped to attention simultaneously. Present. Arms. 800 soldiers raised their right hands in salute. Maya Santos, 20 years old. Medal of Honor recipient, stood before them as the morning sun rose over Fort Liberty. Crawford and Webb, their hands cuffed behind their backs, watched as every soldier they had ever intimidated saluted the woman they had dismissed as nobody. Cole, somewhere in the middle of the formation, felt tears running down her face. She held her salute and made a silent promise. Never again. Never again would she stay silent. Never again would she let fear stop her from doing what was right. General Hayes gave the command. Order, arms! 800 hands lowered, but the moment would stay with every soldier who witnessed it for the rest of their lives. The MPs led Crawford and Webb away, and Maya Santos watched them go with the same calm expression she had worn when the coke was dripping down her face. She had waited 3 weeks for this moment. It was worth every second. The formation remained at attention as the military police escorted Crawford and Webb toward the waiting vehicles. 800 soldiers watched in stunned silence. The morning sun continued to rise, indifferent to the careers that were ending below. Maya stood at the front of the formation, still processing what had just happened. 3 weeks of silence. 3 weeks of abuse. 3 weeks of being nobody. And now, in a matter of minutes, everything had changed. General Hayes stepped beside her. How does it feel? Maya considered the question. I thought it would feel like victory. It doesn't. What does it feel like? Necessary. Hayes nodded slowly. That's the right answer. This was never about revenge. It was about fixing something that was broken. She turned back to the formation and keyed her microphone. At ease, but remain in position. We have more to discuss. The soldiers relaxed slightly, but no one moved. No one spoke. The weight of what they had just witnessed pressed down on all of them. Hayes walked along the front of the formation, her eyes scanning the rows of soldiers. I want to be very clear about something. This investigation was not about punishing individuals. It was about exposing a system that allowed abuse to flourish while protecting the abusers. She stopped walking. Crawford and Webb will face court-martial. They will be held accountable for their actions, but they are not the only ones responsible for what happened at this base. Murmurs rippled through the formation. Hayes raised her hand. 3 weeks ago, Master Sergeant Crawford poured a cup of Coke over Sergeant First Class Santos in front of 200 witnesses. 200 soldiers who saw an abuse of power happen right in front of them. She paused. Not one of them intervened. Not one of them reported what they saw. Not one of them stood up. The silence was absolute. I am not here to punish those 200 soldiers. I am here to ask them a question. Why? No one answered. Hayes continued. Fear, that is the answer, and I understand it. When speaking up means becoming the next target, silence becomes survival. When the system punishes whistleblowers and protects abusers, staying quiet becomes the rational choice. She turned to face the formation directly. But rationality is not the same as righteousness, and survival is not the same as honor. Maya watched the soldiers' faces as Hayes spoke. Some looked ashamed. Some looked defiant. Some looked like they were fighting back tears. She found Cole in the middle of the formation. Cole was crying openly now, not trying to hide it, not wiping the tears away, just standing there letting them fall. Hayes spoke again. Today we begin rebuilding this command. New leadership will be assigned. New protocols will be implemented. New systems of accountability will be established. But all of that means nothing without you. She pointed at the formation. Each of you has a choice to make. You can continue to stay silent when you see something wrong. You can continue to look the other way when your fellow soldiers are suffering. You can continue to choose survival over honor. Her voice hardened. Or you can decide right now that this is the last time you ever let fear stop you from doing what is right. She stepped back. Sergeant First Class Santos has something she would like to say. I suggest you listen. Maya walked to the microphone. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady. 3 weeks ago, I sat in that mess hall with Coke dripping down my face. I could see all of you watching. I could see the disgust on some of your faces. I could see the fear on others. She paused. I did not blame you for staying silent. I still don't. The system was designed to make silence the only safe choice. Crawford and Webb and leaders like them spent years building a machine that punished anyone who spoke up. Maya looked across the formation. But I want you to understand something. That machine only works if you let it. It only has power if you give it power. Every time you stay silent, the machine gets stronger. Every time you look away, the abusers get bolder. Every time you choose safety over integrity, another soldier suffers. Her voice softened. I know how hard it is to stand up. I know the cost. I know the fear. But I also know what happens when good people do nothing. She thought about Private Chen, who had attempted suicide after Crawford humiliated her. She thought about Sergeant Williams, whose career was destroyed for filing a complaint. She thought about all the soldiers whose names she would never know, whose suffering had been buried in files that no one ever read. I was not brave enough to stand up when I was your age. I had a drill sergeant who bullied recruits who made their lives miserable, who broke people for sport. I watched it happen. I stayed silent. I told myself there was nothing I could do. Maya's voice cracked slightly. One of those recruits took his own life 3 weeks after basic training. He was 19 years old. His name was Marcus Rodriguez. He wanted to be a helicopter pilot. The formation was absolutely still. I think about Marcus every day. I think about what would have happened if I had spoken up, if someone had spoken up, if anyone had said something before it was too late. She straightened. I cannot change what happened to Marcus, but I can make sure that what happened here never happens again. And so can you. Maya stepped back from the microphone. The formation remained silent. Then from somewhere in the middle of the ranks, a single voice spoke. Sergeant First Class Santos. Maya looked toward the voice. Specialist Jennifer Cole stepped forward from her position. Her face was wet with tears, but her voice was steady. Permission to speak, Sergeant? Maya nodded. Granted. Cole walked forward until she was standing in front of the formation facing Maya. 3 weeks ago, I watched Master Sergeant Crawford pour that coke on your head. I was sitting 3 tables away. I saw everything. I did nothing. Her voice shook. I told myself there was nothing I could do. I told myself that Crawford was too powerful, that Webb would protect him, that speaking up would only destroy my career. Cole looked at Maya directly. But that was a lie. The truth is, I was scared. I was a coward. And while I was being a coward, you were enduring abuse so that you could protect soldiers like me. She turned to face the formation. I am done being silent. I am done being scared. I don't care what it costs me. I will never watch something like that happen again and do nothing. She turned back to Maya and saluted. Sergeant First Class, I am sorry. I should have been braver. Maya returned the salute. You're being brave now. That's what matters. Cole held the salute for a moment longer, then lowered her hand and returned to her position. For a moment, nothing happened. Then another soldier stepped forward. Private First Class Torres, the young man who flinched every time an NCO raised their voice. Sergeant First Class Santos, permission to speak. Granted. Torres walked to the front of the formation. His hands were shaking, but he kept moving. 6 months ago, Master Sergeant Crawford made me stand at attention for 2 hours because I forgot to salute him. It was raining. When I finally collapsed, he told me I was a disgrace to the uniform. Torres swallowed hard. I didn't report it. I didn't tell anyone. I just tried to stay invisible after that. I thought that if I was invisible, I would be safe. He looked at Maya. But watching you stand there with coke on your face, refusing to break, refusing to cry, refusing to give him the reaction he wanted, that was the first time I thought maybe being invisible wasn't the answer. He saluted. Thank you for showing me what courage looks like. Maya returned the salute. Courage isn't about not being afraid, Private. It's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. Torres returned to his position. Another soldier stepped forward. Then another. Then another. One by one, soldiers walked to the front of the formation and spoke. They confessed their silence. They acknowledged their fear. They committed to doing better. A sergeant who had watched Crawford bully junior soldiers for 3 years. A lieutenant who had signed off on reports she knew were false. A specialist who had transferred rather than speak up about what he had seen. The confessions continued for almost an hour. General Hayes stood beside Maya, watching it unfold. I've never seen anything like this, she said quietly. Neither have I. You started something here, Maya. Something that goes beyond this base. Maya shook her head. I didn't start it. I just gave them permission to be honest. Hayes smiled. That's the same thing. When the last soldier had spoken, the formation fell silent again. But it was a different kind of silence now. Not the silence of fear, the silence of resolve. Hayes stepped forward. What you have all just witnessed is rare. It takes courage to admit failure. It takes strength to commit to change. Each of you who spoke today has taken the first step toward becoming the kind of leader this army needs. She looked across the formation. I am placing this command under direct oversight of my office for the next 12 months. New leadership will be assigned within the week. During this transition, I expect every soldier to uphold the standard that Sergeant First Class Santos has demonstrated. She paused. That standard is simple. See something wrong, say something. Protect each other. Hold each other accountable. And never ever let someone in a position of power abuse that power without consequence. She turned to Maya. Sergeant First Class Santos, you will be assigned to my staff as a special advisor on command climate and leadership accountability. Your first assignment is to help develop new protocols that will be implemented Army-wide. Maya blinked. Ma'am? You heard me. What you learned during this mission is invaluable. You know how these systems fail. You know what enables abuse. You know what it takes to expose it. I need that knowledge. I'm not sure I'm qualified. You're the most qualified person I know. You've been on both sides now. You've been the soldier who stayed silent and the soldier who spoke up. You understand this problem in a way that no one else does. Hayes extended her hand. What do you say, Sergeant First Class, ready to help me fix the entire army? Maya looked at the general's hand. She thought about Marcus Rodriguez, the recruit who had taken his own life. She thought about Private Chen, who had attempted suicide because no one would help her. She thought about all the soldiers at Fort Liberty who had suffered in silence while the system looked away. She thought about Crawford's face when he poured the coke on her head. The smirk. The certainty that he would never face consequences. She thought about what it would mean to spend the rest of her career fighting people like him, and she shook General Hayes's hand. I'm ready. The investigation continued for the rest of the day. Maya spent hours in a conference room with Hayes's investigators, walking them through every incident she had documented, every witness she had identified, every piece of evidence she had collected. The scope of the problem was larger than even she had realized. Crawford and Webb were not alone. Their network extended to other NCOs, other officers, other bases. What had started as a single investigation at Fort Liberty was rapidly expanding into a multi-installation inquiry. By evening, 6 additional soldiers had been detained pending investigation. 2 more officers had been relieved of command. A review of complaint files across all installations in the region had begun. Maya sat alone in the conference room, surrounded by stacks of documents, when Chaplain Reed knocked on the door. May I come in? Of course. Reed walked in and sat across from her. How are you holding up? Maya considered the question. I don't know. It still doesn't feel real. What part? All of it. 3 weeks ago I was a nobody private getting harassed by a bully. Now I'm apparently going to help reform the entire army. Reed smiled. Is that not what you wanted? I wanted to expose Crawford and Webb. I wanted to protect the soldiers at this base. I didn't expect... She gestured at the piles of documents. This. Reed was quiet for a moment. Maya, can I tell you something? Of course. When General Hayes first asked me to be your contact on this mission, I was skeptical. Not of you specifically, but of the mission itself. I had seen too many investigations come and go without changing anything. Too many reports filed and forgotten. Too many promises of reform that never materialized. He leaned forward. But watching you these past 3 weeks changed something in me. Watching you endure abuse without breaking, without losing yourself, without compromising your mission, it reminded me why I became a chaplain in the first place. Why is that? Because I believe in redemption. I believe that broken things can be healed. I believe that people can change. Reed looked at the documents scattered across the table. What happened here today, the confessions, the commitments, the soldiers stepping forward to acknowledge their failures, that was redemption in action. That was people choosing to be better than they had been. Maya nodded slowly. I hope it lasts. So do I. But even if it doesn't, even if some of these soldiers fall back into old patterns, what happened today planted a seed. And seeds have a way of growing even in the hardest soil. He stood up. Get some rest, Maya. Tomorrow will be another long day. And you've earned some peace, even if it's just for a few hours. Maya watched him leave. She thought about what he had said. About seeds. About redemption. About the possibility that broken things could be healed. She did not know if she believed it. But she wanted to. That night, Maya walked across the base toward the barracks where she had spent 3 weeks pretending to be someone else. The building was quiet now. Most of the soldiers were at dinner or in the common areas processing what they had witnessed that morning. She was almost at the door when a voice called out behind her. Sergeant First Class Santos! Maya turned. Master Sergeant Crawford stood 20 feet away, flanked by 2 military police officers. His hands were cuffed in front of him. His uniform was wrinkled. His face was hollow and gray. The MPs stopped walking, apparently giving him a moment. Crawford. He looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. Not anger. Not hatred. Something else. Defeat. I just wanted to know, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. That first day when I told you that you looked like you didn't belong here, did you laugh inside? Maya considered the question. No. No, I felt sorry for you. Crawford's face twisted. Sorry for me. You felt sorry for me. You spent 18 years in the army, 18 years of service, and somewhere along the way you forgot what that service was supposed to mean. You forgot that the uniform is supposed to protect people, not give you power over them. She stepped closer. You could have been a great leader, Crawford. You had the experience, you had the knowledge, but instead of using it to lift soldiers up, you used it to tear them down. Crawford's jaw tightened. I was doing my job. I was maintaining discipline. No, you were feeding something broken inside yourself, something that needed to feel powerful by making others feel small. Maya shook her head. That's not leadership. That's fear. Crawford stared at her. Fear of what? Of finding out you're not as special as you think you are. Of discovering that without the rank and the authority and the power, you're just another person. Someone who could be hurt. Someone who could be dismissed. Someone who could be poured coke on in front of 200 witnesses. Crawford's face crumpled. For a moment, just a moment, he looked like a man who had lost everything and finally understood why. Then the MPs stepped forward. Time to go, Master Sergeant. Crawford did not resist. He did not speak. He just let them lead him away. Maya watched until he disappeared around the corner. She thought about what she had said. About fear. About the need to feel powerful by making others feel small. She thought about the years she had spent becoming strong. The training. The combat. The moments when she had killed to survive. And she wondered if she was really so different from Crawford. Not in what she had done, but in what she could have become. The difference between them was not talent or training or even opportunity. The difference was choice. Crawford had chosen to use his power to hurt people. Maya had chosen to use hers to protect them. That choice was the only thing that mattered. Maya opened the barracks door and walked inside. Tomorrow, she would begin the work of helping General Hayes reform the Army's approach to leadership and accountability. Tomorrow, she would start fighting a new kind of battle, one that could not be won with weapons or tactics, but only with patience, persistence, and the stubborn belief that things could be better. But tonight, she just wanted to sleep. For the first time in 3 weeks, she did not dream about Syria. She did not dream about the firefight, or the blood, or the faces of the men she had killed. She dreamed about her father standing beside her at the shooting range in El Paso, teaching her to aim. She dreamed about his voice calm and patient, telling her that discipline was not about control. It was about knowing when to act and when to wait. She dreamed about the soldiers at Fort Liberty stepping forward one by one to confess their failures and commit to doing better. She dreamed about seeds growing in hard soil. And when she woke up the next morning, the sun was already rising. A new day was beginning, and Maya Santos was ready to face it. 6 months passed. The winter had come and gone. The trees on Fort Liberty had shed their leaves and grown them back again. And the army that Maya Santos had helped expose was still healing from the wounds that had been hidden for so long. Maya stood in the hallway outside Courtroom 3 at Fort Bragg, waiting for the verdict that would close the chapter she had opened 6 months ago. Her dress uniform was immaculate. The Medal of Honor hung at her throat. Her hands were steady at her sides. Inside the courtroom, Master Sergeant Ryan Crawford sat at the defense table, his face gray and hollow after months of pre-trial confinement. His attorney had argued that Crawford was a decorated soldier who had simply been overzealous in maintaining discipline. The prosecution had presented 47 documented incidents, 18 witness statements and audio recordings that Crawford could not explain away. The door opened. A court officer stepped out. "They're ready?" Maya walked into the courtroom and took her seat in the gallery. She was not the only one watching. Specialist Jennifer Cole sat 3 rows behind her. Private First Class Torres was near the back. Chaplain Reed had driven 4 hours to be present. General Hayes had sent a representative. The soldiers Crawford had abused had come to see justice delivered. The military judge, Colonel Patricia Henderson, entered the courtroom. Everyone stood. She took her seat and opened a folder. The court has reached a verdict in the case of United States versus Master Sergeant Ryan Crawford. Crawford stood. His attorney stood beside him. Henderson looked directly at Crawford. "On the charge of hazing, this court finds you guilty. On the charge of conduct unbecoming a non-commissioned officer, this court finds you guilty. On the charge of creating a hostile environment, this court finds you guilty." Crawford's shoulders slumped. "This court sentences you to reduction in rank, to private E1 forfeiture of all pay and allowances, and a dishonorable discharge from the United States Army. Additionally, you are sentenced to 18 months confinement at the United States Disciplinary Barracks." Crawford did not react. He stood there staring straight ahead as the weight of 18 years of service collapsed into nothing. Henderson continued, "Master Sergeant Crawford, you had the privilege of leading soldiers who trusted you. You had the responsibility of protecting them, mentoring them, and preparing them for the challenges they would face. Instead, you used your authority to humiliate them, abuse them, and break them down." Her voice hardened. "The Army does not exist to serve you. You exist to serve the Army and the soldiers in your charge. You forgot that, and now you will pay the price." She closed the folder. This court is adjourned." The MPs stepped forward to escort Crawford out. He walked past Maya without looking at her. His eyes were empty. His face was blank. Maya watched him go. She did not feel satisfaction. She did not feel triumph. She felt the same thing she had felt when she shook General Hayes's hand 6 months ago. Necessity. This had been necessary. Justice had been necessary. And now it was done. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb's verdict had come 3 weeks earlier. His trial had been longer and more complicated. Webb had connections. Webb had lawyers. Webb had friends in high places who tried to intervene on his behalf. None of it mattered. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of buried complaints, dozens of investigations that had been quietly closed, a systematic pattern of protecting abusers while destroying whistleblowers. Webb had been found guilty of dereliction of duty, obstruction of investigation, and conduct unbecoming an officer. He had been stripped of his rank, his pension, and his dignity. He had been sentenced to 3 years confinement. When the verdict was announced, Webb had turned to look at the gallery. Maya had been sitting in the front row. Their eyes had met. Webb had opened his mouth to say something, then closed it again. Whatever he had wanted to say, he had decided it was not worth the effort. Maya had watched him being led away in handcuffs, and she had felt nothing but a quiet certainty that the system she had helped expose was finally being dismantled. After Crawford's verdict, Maya walked out of the courtroom into the bright afternoon sun. Cole was waiting for her on the steps. "It's over," Cole said. "No, it's just beginning." Cole looked at her. "What do you mean?" Maya turned to face her. "Crawford and Webb are gone, but there are others like them at bases all over the country, all over the world. This was one battle. The war is going to take years." Cole nodded slowly. "Are you ready for that? I have to be." They walked together toward the parking lot. Cole had changed in the 6 months since the incident in the mess hall. She had been promoted to sergeant. She had become one of the most vocal advocates for command climate reform at Fort Liberty. She had testified at both trials without hesitation. The frightened specialist who had watched Crawford pour coke on Maya's head was gone. In her place was a soldier who understood what it meant to stand up. "Maya, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever regret it? Going undercover, becoming someone else, letting them treat you like that?" Maya was quiet for a moment. "Every day." Cole blinked. "Really? Not because it wasn't worth it. It was. But because I had to become invisible to expose people who made others feel invisible. I had to be weak to expose people who preyed on the weak. I had to let them hurt me to prove that they would hurt anyone they thought couldn't fight back." She stopped walking. "That does something to you, Jennifer. Even when you know it's temporary. Even when you know it's for a greater purpose. You can't pretend to be powerless without remembering what powerlessness actually feels like." Cole nodded. "I think I understand. I hope you never have to understand completely." And they reached Maya's car. "What happens now?" Cole asked. "I fly back to Washington tonight. General Hayes has a meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. We're presenting the new command climate protocols to the Army Chief of Staff. The protocols you helped develop. The protocols that the soldiers at Fort Liberty helped develop. Everything we learned from the investigation, everything we heard during the confessions that day, it's all been incorporated. If the chief approves them, they'll be implemented across every installation in the Army." Cole smiled. "You're going to change the entire Army." "We are, all of us. Everyone who spoke up, everyone who testified, everyone who decided that silence was no longer an option." Maya opened her car door. "Jennifer, I want you to know something. That day in the mess hall when you finally stepped forward and admitted what you had seen that took more courage than anything I did. I was trained for this. I was prepared for this. You weren't. You just decided to be brave. Cole's eyes glistened. I had a good example. Maya smiled. You're going to be a great leader someday. I hope I'm there to see it. She got in the car and drove away. Cole watched her go, then turned and walked back toward the base. She had work to do. General Hayes was waiting when Maya arrived at the Pentagon the next morning. How was the verdict? Guilty on all counts, 18 months confinement, and a dishonorable discharge. Hayes nodded. Good. It's not enough, but it's something. It's precedent. That's what matters. They walked together through the corridors of the Pentagon, past offices and conference rooms, and security checkpoints. Maya had been here many times over the past 6 months, but she still felt out of place among the generals and colonels and senior officials who populated these halls. She was 21 years old now, the youngest person in most rooms she entered. The only Medal of Honor recipient that no one recognized because her identity was still classified. Hayes seemed to read her thoughts. You know I could make your status public. Now that the investigation is complete, there's no operational reason to keep your identity classified. You could be recognized, celebrated, given the credit you deserve. Maya shook her head. I don't want credit. I want results. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Maybe not. But I've seen what happens to soldiers who become symbols. They get promoted. They get assigned to public affairs. They spend the rest of their careers giving speeches and shaking hands while someone else does the actual work. She looked at Hayes. I want to do the actual work. Hayes smiled. That's why I recommended you for the position. What position? Hayes stopped walking. I wasn't going to tell you until after the meeting, but you deserve to know now. The chief has approved the creation of a new office within the Inspector General's division. Its mission is to investigate command climate failures and develop systemic solutions. Maya felt her heart rate increase. And I recommended you to lead it, not as an advisor, as the commanding officer. The chief agreed. Maya stared at her. I'm a sergeant first class. You want me to command an office in the Pentagon? I want you to be commissioned as a captain and given the authority to do what needs to be done. The same things you did at Fort Liberty, but on a larger scale. I told you I didn't want a commission. I know what you told me. I'm asking you to reconsider. Maya looked down at her hands. She thought about what it would mean to accept. The responsibility, the visibility, the pressure. She thought about what it would mean to refuse, staying in the shadows, doing the work without the authority, hoping that someone else would make the decisions she knew needed to be made. If I say yes, I want one condition. Name it. I get to choose my own team, soldiers from the field, not from Washington. People who understand what it's like to be on the receiving end of abuse. Hayes nodded. Done. And I want Jennifer Cole as my first recruit. Hayes smiled. The specialist who stepped forward at Fort Liberty, the one who became the first soldier to publicly admit she had witnessed the mess hall incident. She's a sergeant now, and she's exactly the kind of person this office needs. I'll make the call. They continued walking toward the chief's conference room. Maya's mind was racing. 3 years ago, she had been a private first class trying to survive basic training. 2 years ago, she had been fighting for her life in a bullet-riddled building in Syria. 1 year ago, she had been recovering from wounds that should have killed her. And now she was about to become a captain, a leader, someone with the authority to change the system from the inside. It was more than she had ever imagined. It was exactly what she had always wanted. The meeting with the chief lasted 2 hours. Maya presented the new command climate protocols. She explained how they had been developed, what problems they were designed to address, and how they would be implemented. She answered questions from generals who had been in the army longer than she had been alive. She did not falter. She did not hesitate. She spoke with the same calm certainty she had shown when Crawford had confronted her in the holding cell. The same discipline she had demonstrated when the coke was dripping down her face. When she finished, the chief was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "Sergeant First Class Santos, I've been in this army for 35 years. I've seen a lot of young soldiers come through these halls with ideas about how to change things. Most of them burned out. Most of them gave up. Most of them discovered that the system is harder to change than they thought." He leaned forward. "But I've never met anyone quite like you. You survived something that would have broken most people. And instead of letting it break you, you used it to become stronger. You took everything you learned and turned it into a weapon against the very people who thought they were untouchable." He stood up. "The protocols you've presented today are the most comprehensive command climate reform package I've ever seen. They address problems that have plagued this army for decades, and they were developed by a 21-year-old sergeant who went undercover as a private to expose the truth." He extended his hand. "Captain Santos, welcome to the team." Maya shook his hand. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me. Prove me right." 3 months later, Maya returned to Fort Liberty. She was not there for an investigation. She was not there undercover. She was there to see how much had changed. The base looked different. The faces were different. But more than that, the atmosphere was different. Soldiers walked with their heads up. NCOs spoke to junior enlisted with respect. The fear that had permeated every corner of the installation was gone. Maya walked through the motor pool where Crawford had humiliated her 9 months ago. She walked past the mess hall where 200 soldiers had watched in silence. She walked by the barracks where she had spent 3 weeks pretending to be invisible. None of it felt the same. Because none of it was the same. She found Chaplain Reed in his office. "Captain Santos, I heard you were coming." "I wanted to see it for myself." Reed smiled. "And what do you see? Progress. Real progress." "It's not perfect. We still have problems. We still have soldiers who fall through the cracks. We still have leaders who don't meet the standard. But the culture is different now. People speak up. People report problems. People believe that if they say something, it will actually be heard." Maya nodded. "That's all I ever wanted." "Is it?" She looked at him. "What do you mean?" Reed leaned back in his chair. "I've been a chaplain for 22 years. I've counseled thousands of soldiers, and I've learned that people rarely want just one thing. Usually the thing they say they want is connected to something deeper, something they might not even recognize themselves." He paused. "So I'm asking you, Captain, what do you really want?" Maya was quiet for a long moment. She thought about her father who had died when she was 16. She thought about Marcus Rodriguez, the recruit who had taken his own life because no one would help him. She thought about the soldiers at Fort Liberty who had suffered in silence for years. "I want to matter," she said finally. "I want my life to mean something. I want to look back when I'm old and know that I made a difference, that the world was a little bit better because I was in it." Reed nodded. "And does your life mean something?" Maya thought about Crawford's face when she told him who she really was. She thought about Cole's tears when she stepped forward to confess. She thought about the 800 soldiers who had saluted her on the parade ground. "Yes," she said. "It does." "Good." Reed stood up and extended his hand. "Then keep fighting, Captain. The world needs people like you." Maya shook his hand. "I will." She walked out of the chaplain's office and headed toward the barracks. There was one more person she needed to see. Private First Class Elena Vasquez was 19 years old. She had been at Fort Liberty for 2 months. She was quiet, hard-working, and determined to prove herself. She was also the soldier who had written a letter to Maya 3 weeks ago. Maya found her in the common area studying a technical manual. "Private Vasquez." Elena looked up and immediately jumped to her feet. "Captain Santos, I didn't expect you to come in person. I just wanted to thank you for responding to my letter." "Can we talk somewhere private?" Elena nodded nervously and led Maya to a small conference room. They sat across from each other. "Your letter said you were considering leaving the army," Maya said. "Tell me why." Elena looked down at her hands. "Before everything changed here, I was having a hard time. There was an NCO who, he said things, did things. Nothing as bad as what happened to you, but enough to make me feel like I didn't belong." "Did you report it?" "Yes. And for the first time ever, someone listened. He was counseled. He was reassigned. The system actually worked." Maya nodded. "Maya, then why are you thinking about leaving?" Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Because I'm scared it won't last. I'm scared that once the spotlight moves on, everything will go back to the way it was. I'm scared that I'll spend 20 years in this army and end up just as broken as the people who came before me." Maya leaned forward. "Elena, look at me." The young private looked up. 9 months ago, I sat in this same base in these same barracks with coke dripping down my face while 200 soldiers watched and did nothing. I know what fear feels like. I know what it's like to wonder if things will ever change." She reached out and took Elena's hand. "But here's what I've learned. Change doesn't happen because one person does something extraordinary. It happens because ordinary people make small choices every single day to be a little bit braver than they were yesterday." She squeezed Elena's hand. "You reported that NCO. That was a small choice, but it mattered. It showed everyone around you that speaking up was possible, that the system could work, that things could be different." Elena wiped her eyes. "I didn't think of it that way. Most people don't. They think courage has to look like what I did going undercover exposing a conspiracy standing in front of 800 soldiers. But that's not true. Courage looks like a 19-year-old private walking into her commander's office and saying, 'This is what happened to me, and I need help.'" Maya stood up. "Stay in the army, Elena. Not because it's perfect, it's not, but because it needs people like you. People who are willing to keep fighting even when they're scared. People who believe that things can be better." Elena stood up too. "Captain, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "The day that man poured coke on your head, what kept you from fighting back?" Maya smiled. "I was fighting back, just not in the way he expected. He thought I was weak because I didn't yell or cry or hit him. But the truth is, I was stronger than he could ever understand. I was waiting. And when the time came, I didn't need to raise my voice or my fists. I just needed the truth to speak for itself." She walked to the door. "The uniform doesn't make you strong, Elena. What you do when no one's watching when standing up costs you everything. That's what makes you strong." Elena saluted. Maya returned the salute. "Welcome to the Army, Private. Make it count." She walked out of the barracks and into the afternoon sun. Fort Liberty was behind her. Washington was waiting. And somewhere out there on bases across the country and around the world, soldiers were making small choices to be a little bit braver than they were yesterday. Maya did not know all their names. She would never meet most of them. But she knew they were there. She knew that what had happened at Fort Liberty had sent ripples outward, touching lives she would never see, changing stories she would never hear. That was enough. That was more than enough. She got in her car and drove toward the gate. In the rearview mirror, she could see the parade ground where 800 soldiers had stood at attention for a woman they had dismissed as nobody. She could see the mess hall where a bully had poured coke on her head and called her sweetheart. She could see the barracks where she had spent 3 weeks being invisible. And she could see in the faces of every soldier she passed something that had not been there 9 months ago. Hope. Real hope. The kind that came from knowing that someone was fighting for them. That the system could change. That the uniform they wore actually meant something. Maya Santos was 21 years old. She was a captain in the United States Army. She was the youngest living recipient of the Medal of Honor, and she was just getting started. Because courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to stand when everyone else stays seated. Courage is speaking when everyone else stays silent. Courage is becoming the person you needed when you were young and scared and alone. Master Sergeant Ryan Crawford had poured a cup of coke on her head and called her sweetheart. He had thought she was nobody. He had been wrong, and every soldier who heard this story would remember that truth, the people who look the weakest, are sometimes the strongest. The ones who stay silent are sometimes just waiting, and the moment you underestimate someone based on how they look is the moment you have already lost. Maya Santos had proven it, and she was going to spend the rest of her life making sure no one ever forgot.